Welcome back to the Clever Cow podcast. I'm your host, Savanah Carpenter, and today we're talking about how dairies can reduce emissions while staying productive and profitable. Today's guest brings a truly unique perspective to this conversation. From milking 6 cows with his brothers in rural Uganda to helping shape research at what will become the largest research dairy in the United States. Dr. Gilbert Miito is an assistant professor and extension specialist in air quality at the University of Idaho. Dr. Miito, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Savanah. Glad to be here. I look forward to our discussion.
Yeah, so I just want to start off with asking a little bit of your background.
Yeah.
So growing up on a small dairy in Uganda, how did that early experience shape the way you approach solutions for Western U.S. dairies today?
So I come from like you said, a rural background in Uganda, and my perspective is really a bridge between like a traditional kind of dairy and the state-of-the-art kind of dairies that we have here in the USA. So yeah, like you said, growing up, me and my brothers would wake up early in the morning and go forage for the cows and milk them early in the morning with no light. So coming from that background and looking at how big the dairies are here, and some of the principles that I grew up knowing that, hey, we need to utilize our waste, we need to manage the dairy industry pretty well. I kind of relate to what the position that I'm in now, where I have to do this, but on a larger scale. So this background of how a dairy can be productive and sustainable is kind of what I'm building on for the research that I'm going to do at the University of Idaho.
Did that, your background, is that what inspired you to focus on the dairy industry?
Yeah, it definitely it definitely helps me because I'm a dairy guy. I've grown up on a dairy. I love cows. I love animals. I love dairy productivity. So working in something that I grew up doing and something that I love, I think gives me all the motivation that I need.
Yeah, that's a great answer. I'm kind of similar with that. I also grew up on a dairy, and I feel like, I don't know, I just have a lot of respect for dairymen and the industry, and I feel like it also inspires me.
Yeah, I believe you, and I think it's a really good inspiration. Sometimes I feel bad when I listen to maybe how the dairy industry is getting all this backlash and people saying all things about how maybe or cows are destroying the environment and destroying climate and all that. But I think that's just part of the discussion. It's not the whole picture. So I feel like we have an opportunity to address some of these and teach some of these people and inform them and correct some of the misinformation that they do have.
Yeah, I feel like it's really reassuring too that people who care about the dairy industry and have a background in that, even though they're on more of the climate side, just want to help the industry at the end of the day. And it's not with the public, sometimes the opinion isn't always the best. So I was looking a little bit at your background, work-wise. So you've worked in research and industry, both. So you've worked at WSU, the University of Missouri, and Biofiltro.
Yes.
What experiences from those roles most influenced your work in extension now?
So at Washington State University and at Missouri, this is where I did my graduate degrees and my postdoc. I think I was working a lot still with dairies and manure systems. So it gave me the opportunity to hone my skills in measuring and quantifying the environmental impact of dairy systems. So I believe that skill set is actually what I'm relying on now for the research that I'm doing. And when I was at Biofiltro, that gave me an opportunity to get some of this classroom knowledge and apply it on a full-scale commercial kind of dairy. So because we're working with direct farmers in California, we were building for them manure management systems. We're helping them manage their manure. So I believe that gave me an opportunity to pick some of the work that I did in class to now put it to a real practical use in the field. So this these opportunities all gave me a good stepping stone for the work that I'm going to do at the University of Idaho.
How has it been since you did your research and work in so many different like regions of the US?
Yes.
How has that changed coming to Idaho?
I think it has changed because I've been to the rural USA. I've been to high-end agriculture systems in California. So I have a bit of perspective of what a heavily funded or high-end kind of agriculture system looks like, and what a small rural, low-funded kind of agriculture system looks like. So I do have the comparison between the two, and some technologies that work for the bigger systems may not necessarily work for the smaller systems. So some things are not transferable, but at least I feel like I have the ability to tell that this is how some of the knowledge is transferable, but then this is also what is more appropriate for low-funded, smaller agriculture systems like I would say in Idaho compared to other maybe bigger systems. So I feel like that gives me that perspective of looking at the larger scale and the smaller scale and what works for either.
That's really important. Yeah, especially with such varying dairy sizes, like nothing's going to be, it's not like a one size fits all thing. Like it's going to be very different solutions depending on dairy size.
Correct.
And I feel like that's a very important lens to have.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, and now I want to deep dive more into emissions on the dairy. So on a typical Idaho dairy, where do most emissions come from? So there's cow enteric methane, which is basically like from cow burps.
Yes.
And then you have on-farm manure handling, and then also field applications.
So I think at the moment, the sore subject in terms of emissions is to do with enteric fermentation. We have a lot of methane coming from the biodigestion of feed in animals gives off methane, which comes out as burps.
Mm-hmm.
Some people prefer to call it cow farts, but technically it's cow burps.
For listeners who might not be familiar with that term, enteric methane is the gas produced during digestion in a cow's rumen. Inside the rumen, microbes break down feed through fermentation. That process naturally produces methane as a byproduct, and most of it is released through the cow's burps. Because it's tied directly to digestion, researchers often focus on diet and feed additives when looking for ways to reduce methane emissions from cattle.
So this is the largest portion of emissions. Then manure is also a big portion of the byproducts on dairy systems. So we have like a huge amount of emissions coming off of manure systems. And then how we use manure when we apply manure to grow our forage crops or silage crops or whatever crops we're growing. By applying manure, sometimes we get some emissions like nitrous oxide coming off of the soil. So in priority, I think methane emission is the highest from enteric fermentation, then manure comes in second, and then emissions from soil after manure application.
It's really interesting because I was just doing some research before this, and I saw like the statistic that in 1 year, each cow produces 220 pounds of methane.
Yes.
And I was trying to kind of wrap my head around that, but I figured out that it ended up being, for a whole year, it ended up being a 2-car garage of them filling up with their burps. And if you think of that, like each cow doing that, that's obviously a lot of methane.
I think it can be a lot of methane, but I look at it as a byproduct, something that we have to deal with. So yes, the number might be true, but I look at it from the angle of, yes, we need the food systems, because if you look at emissions, rice production does generate emissions, but you don't hear people saying, let's fix something about rice growing, so there's emissions coming off of that. There's emissions coming off of cars. We all drive cars.
Or the aviation industry.
But some way this is all, there's a way all the attention turns to cows. So yes, cows do have a contribution, but it's not like if we fix emissions from cows, then the world is going to be, all the problems of the world are going to be solved. So yes, it's a problem that we have to work on and mitigate, but it's not like the only problem that we have to deal with to fix the system.
That was so good.
Yeah.
Sorry, I got excited about your answer. I really like your perspective with that. I feel like, yeah, there's a lot of focus on ag, and I think there's tons of ways that we can improve, but I think it's important to keep our heads and know that where food comes from really matters, and we can't just attack an entire industry that's so important to the whole world in feeding it.
Yes, I agree. I think, yeah, it's very good to have that discussion, but I think sometimes we tend to just want to lump things and say, hey, this is where the problem is, just fix this and we'll move on. But I think it's a more complex problem than people make it seem.
Yeah. In a little bit of my other research, I feel like when it comes to just like the dairy industry, for example, compared to the aviation industry, from like beginning to end, they give very detailed numbers for like all the emissions that are coming from the dairy industry. But in the aviation, they're like not being as specific. And I just found that pretty illuminating as well.
I think there's a reason why. If you dig deep, you'll find that reason. But I think it gives us an opportunity to tell our story from the ag side of things and say, hey, yes, this is how a picture looks, but who is painting that picture? This is a better picture to show. So I think that's where we come in. We have that opportunity to address some of these misconceptions.
Have you heard of the green feed machine?
Yes, I've heard of the green feed machine.
It's pretty cool.
Yes, it definitely is cool. And that's one of the, let me say, the gold standard of measuring emissions right now. Actually, at the dairy that we're building in Rupert at CAFE, it's going to be the biggest research dairy in the USA. So as soon as it's running, we have a plan to have some green feed systems over there to start measuring the emissions that are coming off of our systems.
For those of you that don't know, a green feed system is a piece of research equipment used to measure methane emissions from cattle. It works by attracting cows with a small amount of feed. While the cow is eating, the machine captures the air around the animal's mouth and nose and analyzes it for gases like methane and carbon dioxide. Because cows release most of their methane through burps during digestion, the system can measure those gases and estimate how much methane each animal is producing over time. By collecting thousands of these short measurements, researchers can better understand how diet, genetics, and management practices affect emissions from dairy cattle. That's awesome that it's going to be at CAFE.
Yes, those are really, we already have some. We have I don't know if you've heard of the Nancy M. Cummings. It's more of a beef research operation that is part of University of Idaho. We do have 2 green feed systems over there. So they're measuring emissions in beef feedlot kind of systems. But we're going to have 2 or 3 more of those that are particularly for measuring emissions on dairies at CAFE as soon as it's running.
So, what do you think people most often misunderstand where dairy emissions come from or how they're created?
Yeah, I think there's 2 misconceptions that I can talk about. One, I already hinted on that when I said many people think it's cow farts. And I think it's easier to sell by saying, oh, the cow farts. But it's cow burps, and that's a bit of a misconception. But another one that I could focus on is where most of these emissions come from. Some people say that some people have this conception that most of the emissions come from lagoons, or every time they pass by a dairy and smell, they pick up a kind of an odor from the facility. They think that's emissions.
So they link odor with emissions. Yeah. That makes sense though. I mean, there's because you can't see it, it's the only tangible or sense that you can link to it.
Exactly. But surprisingly, gases like methane don't even smell. So you can't smell methane. So it's a misconception, and people think that as soon as something smells, if a cow smells, that's emissions. That's odor, which is associated with almost any living organism. So I think it's a misconception that we also need to correct.
That's a really good answer. You're killing it, by the way.
You're setting me up.
Okay, so let's talk about feed then, since we were getting into enteric methane. So what strategies or additives are showing the most promise right now in reducing enteric methane?
So at the moment, there's a lot of active ongoing research in feed additives. And in the research world, we believe that emissions mostly come from what the animals eat. So there's a lot of ongoing research on feed additives that could reduce emissions. These are not endorsements, but there is one product that has been approved for use in lactating animals. It's called 3-NOP.
Quick explanation for listeners. One of the additives Dr. Miito mentioned is called 3-NOP. It's a feed ingredient designed to reduce methane produced during digestion. It works by slowing down one of the final steps in the chemical pathway that microbes use to produce methane inside the rumen. Early research shows it can reduce methane emissions from dairy cattle by around 20 to 40%, depending on the diet and conditions.
This is one of the products that has gone through all the legislation and approval, so it's available for farmers to try, and we've seen data where it has reduced the emissions by up to 50%. So 3-NOP is one of the products. There is seaweed. It's just a red seaweed, and it also reduces the emissions when it's mixed with feed. So there's ongoing research with that. There's other supplements like nitrates and fats and some like more digestible forages. So there's a lot of feed additives that are being tested to see which ones can actually reduce methane emissions. And we are hopeful that as soon as our dairy is running in CAFE, we should be able to have the capacity to run some of these feed trials and find out what actually works best for an Idaho dairy in terms of reducing emissions.
Maybe you don't know this yet, but do you know which one you're planning on doing first, or are you going to kind of like have a couple tested all at the same time?
I think we plan to have a couple, but 3-NOP is low-hanging fruit because it's already been through FDA approval, and so there's not a lot of pushback that we might get from that. There's other newer, more novel feed additives that are still ongoing. They're still going through the process of being fully approved for use with livestock. So those ones, we will deal with them later, but for now, we have a low-hanging fruit in 3-NOP. So it will be a first one to try out for sure.
Do you think a lot of dairymen have heard of 3-NOP?
They've probably heard about it. There's a bit of skepticism. The dairy industry is can be very skeptical because they've seen technologies come and go, and they know that some of these companies are not serving the best interests of the dairies. So every time they see a new product on the market, there's always a bit of pushback. And still that comes back to university employees and university researchers. We're supposed to do some of this hard work and tell the farmers that, yes, this actually works, and it's something we can advise you to go on with. So they know about it, but the adoption is not as fast as it should be because there's still some questions to answer.
If a dairy in Idaho used 3-NOP, would there be like an option for carbon credits with that? Like as of this point, with it still being kind of entry?
So at the moment, we don't yet have carbon credits in regards to that, and that's also gives an opportunity maybe to the federal government or the state or any organizations that are passionate about that. It gives them an opportunity for something to work through, because at the moment we don't have any carbon credits from reducing methane. So
it seems to be the one that everybody's most concerned about.
Yes, methane is a big concern.
It's ironic.
Yeah, it is a big concern now, and there's actually there's a huge school of research in reducing methane. But it's also important to note that some of these technologies could be still at a smaller scale. Like what works at a small scale does not necessarily work on 1,000 cow dairy. So we need to help the farmers understand how to, scale up some of these technologies from small controlled experiments to full scale commercial dairy application. So there's a bit of that where we have to come in.
It was interesting when I was reading about like other additives that have been tried, because all of the ones that you mentioned for sure. But I also saw on there that they've tried oregano, which was interesting.
Yeah, I think it's very surprising. At the moment, we're trying out a lot of things. So oregano would be one of the natural products. Like when I was talking of the red seaweed and oregano, we have a lot of people who are in the animal nutrition, and they go into the chemistry of these products, and probably they could find a compound in any of those products, and that compound could be what we need to reduce the emissions. So it could be from anything. It could be from broccoli. It could be from oregano. We're looking out for those solutions.
Yeah, well, that's what research is. You really just gotta try the whole menu.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's interesting. Like, if there's already been tons of talk about like the red seaweed, I've heard about that one first before 3-NOP. Yeah, if they tried to implement that though, I wonder, like with them growing it, obviously grow it in the ocean and then dry it out and ship it so it's not as heavy. Yeah, I wonder like later on, maybe in like 5-10 years or so, it'll be interesting to see like how it develops and like the cost compared to 3-NOP.
Yes. I think cost is just one part of what we need to see. We also need to understand the long-term effect of some of these feed additives, because yes, they might reduce the emissions, but what's happening in the animal biology, in the rumen of the animals in 5 years? So we also need to have those long-term kind of studies to understand that. But yes, cost is a big one. We need to understand how the cost relates, because at the moment, when I talked about 3-NOP, I would say it's still not cheap yet for dairy farmers to easily access it and buy it and use it full scale. So there's still an opportunity to, produce more of those products and figure out how to cost cut and how to give some subsidies to farmers. So there's more work we need to do.
It'll be cool to see the way it develops. Yeah, I hope there's not very many long-term impacts with the seaweed. Yeah, that is very concerning.
We hope there are no long-term effects.
How long have they been running tests on it? Like, when did they first? It was from UC Davis, right?
Yes, the team at UC Davis actually did the first trials. So there've been a couple of trials, probably in Wisconsin and somewhere maybe in Florida. There's some more recent literature, but I would say it goes back to like 3 to 4 years. I think this field of study is not yet very old. So we still have a lot of ongoing work. And the team at UC Davis is still running these trials with the red seaweed. So we are getting more and more information each day that passes by.
Yeah.
I believe they're also working with the regulation, because these products can't hit the market until they get approval from like FDA and to make sure that the animal health is met and the food quality is not compromised. So
have they been researching 3-NOP longer than the red seaweed then?
3-NOP, yes, has more literature available, because to go through the whole approval process, you have to submit like studies that you've done and what results you observed. So 3-NOP went through all those processes of regulation. So there's probably more literature on it than red seaweed. But red seaweed is like the hot topic right now. It's the hot item.
Especially, I think, because it can cut more emissions than 3-NOP, right?
Apparently it can.
Yeah, I feel like that varies, but I don't know. That's, I guess, the main appeal.
Yes, it's more natural and we believe it has more potential to reduce emissions. So it's the new kid on the block. We are following it closely to see how the research shapes up.
What are some of the practical challenges producers face when adopting these strategies, such as cost, availability, or ration complexity?
So I've hinted on some of these. The cost, yes, it's very possible to say that this product is going to reduce emissions by 50%, but it's going to cost, let me just come up with a number, $50 per animal per day. And who is going to pay for that? So the cost sometimes can be a prohibiting factor, and it's a challenge that we're dealing with. Probably with more research and more production of these feed additives, maybe the prices will go down with the economies of scale. But at the moment, I would say they're still high. The regulation and going through the approval process is a nightmare. Most people who are working in this field will tell you that it could take anywhere from 5 to 10 years to get through the approval process, which is good because we want to make sure that these products are not harmful to animals and not harmful to our human food systems. Yes, as it is, the process is pretty intense. So it's also a hindering factor and a challenge that we have to deal with. But also what you talked about with the rations and these feed additives, we don't fully know how they will change the rations. Will they change the milk production? Will they change the fat content of the milk? So we still have these questions to answer. How do these feed additives change what we're doing now, what we already know?
Mm-hmm.
So I think they pose us some challenges where, as researchers, these are the questions that give us sleepless nights.
I think CAFE is going to be so pivotal in that. It's nice to have it being tested here in Idaho instead of like over in California. I feel like the dairy producers in Idaho, it'll impact them hugely, and it's nice to know that.
And thanks for bringing that up, because it's also a big factor. Some technologies don't easily transfer across state lines. Like, I could come up with something good that's working in California, does not necessarily mean that it's going to work in Idaho, because the farming systems are different. The weather is different, so there has to be something that is tailored to Idaho, and CAFE gives us that opportunity. We can have our own trials and find out which of these feed additives probably works best for Idaho, not only for the weather or the animal systems here, but financially, which ones make better sense to farmers in Idaho. So I think CAFE gives us that opportunity to run some of those experiments.
I'm really excited. So where do you see the most value for money in systems like solid separation lagoon covers, flaring, or anaerobic digestion?
So I think, when you talk about value for money, definitely I think solid separation is a pretty low-hanging fruit, because going back to that, emissions, when we have the manure mixed as the liquid part and the solids part, we have like a good environment for growth of microorganisms, and that is a good methane hub. So one of the easier ways to start addressing that problem is separating the liquids and the solids. So having good solids liquid separation system is one of like the best ways I can say is the best value for money when it comes to manure management. You talked about covers and digesters. These are good. They are some of like the best technologies we have out there to manage manure, but they're also expensive. So if you have a small dairy of 500 animals, even 1,000 animals, we've seen cases where digesters don't make financial sense to a dairy with 1,000 animals, because they prefer larger dairies with 5,000, 6,000 plus. So covers and digesters are good, but the economics comes into play.
I've often wondered so you know how we have like our wastewater treatment plants and stuff for human waste. Well, say you had 7 dairies in the same similar area. If there was like a waste treatment plant that they could all kind of go in on and run their manure through that, I don't know. I just have thought about if that would actually be feasible or not.
I think some people have brought up that idea. I think when I was in Missouri, we started hearing of what they call like a satellite manure treatment system, whereby all the dairies, like what you're explaining, all the dairies just have a central point where they bring their manure and treat it at one place. It kind of makes sense, especially for small dairies. It still has some logistical challenges because you're moving manure that is heavy and wet, so it's very hard to transport. So you're going to spend a lot of money. Someone has to pay for that. But sometimes also the biosecurity comes in. If there is an outbreak of something, who takes blame for what?
Mm-hmm.
So I think if we look at the biosecurity and the economics of that. So the idea sounds good, and I think there's people who are there's a word that you could check out. It's called a manure shed. Like you have a manure shed, like all the manure in this area should be handled here.
Yeah.
So it's a concept that has been raised, but I think we need to understand it more and understand the logistics and any other trade-offs that will come up with that.
Inside barns and pens, which routine management practices like scraper timing or ventilation make the biggest difference for emissions or odor?
I think scraper timing definitely stands out. It helps because you remove the manure before it's exposed to all the elements and like the heat and the sun and the rain. So you scrape it off pretty fast. That's the best. But like I said, it also has some challenges because how many times can you scrape, and who is, there's an extra cost attached to that.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a good one, but there is also an economic aspect to it. And, like you need manual labor to do that. So,
or like a robotic system in place.
Yeah. Could be a robotic system.
But then that's even more probably.
that one is also expensive. So for a small dairy farmer in Idaho, having a robotic cleaning system might not be the best. Mm-hmm. For a larger scale dairy, that's probably an option. If you clean more, you will definitely see a reduction in emissions. And yeah, you talked about also ventilation. Yes, ventilation is just you're keeping the environment more as natural as possible. So we will see a reduction in emissions because of good ventilation. But then you also have to protect the animals from elements and all that. So everything comes with a pro and cons that we need to look at.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like there's always like a catch somewhere.
Yeah.
So if a dairy has funding for just one upgrade in the next couple of years, where would you recommend they start, and what makes that kind of change stick over time?
Solid separation is kind of low hanging. So if a dairy has some funding, I think having a good solid separation system would be a good starting point. If you can separate the solids and compost them and then have the liquids, they go through the lagoon system. If you have more money and can afford kind of like a lagoon cover, I think that's another good technology to pick up on. Cover your lagoon, and probably either you could flare off. At the moment, we don't have carbon credits in Idaho for such manure systems, but if you could flare off, those would be at least good starting options for reducing emissions in dairy systems.
So what should farms know about lingering nitrous oxide risks from past manure use, and how can irrigation or application timing help manage those spikes?
So I'm going to give you, let me start with good news. Nitrous oxide is a problem, but it's not as big of a problem as methane. Mm-hmm. We actually just did we did some research now with my collaboration with USDA, and we found out that yes, nitrous oxide is a nuisance when it comes to manure management. When we apply manure, we get nitrous oxide, but the amounts are lower than methane. But coming back to that, yes, when we apply manure, there is some residual effect. Some of these emissions can linger. Nitrous oxide comes from multiple factors. It's influenced by the soil moisture. It's influenced by the temperature. So when these conditions are right, we have nitrous oxide, but it lingers. So you could apply manure today, and then the conditions are more favorable maybe tomorrow or next day. That's when you'll see a spike in nitrous oxide emissions. So it's something that we should know, and we should keep an eye on the soil moisture, and we should know when to apply the manure and what are the crop demands. If we over apply manure, we're definitely going to see the spike in nitrous oxide emissions. So the timing, the crop requirements, and the weather are big factors in how much nitrous oxide we are seeing. Yeah, so there's no defined time that when you apply today, you're going to see nitrous oxide spikes tomorrow. There are models. There's people who do modeling, so they can model that the soil is behaving like this. But the challenge with models is they don't explain. Models are most times linear. Mm-hmm. So natural systems are harder. Like you can't model when there'll be oxidizing bacteria in the soil.
Yeah.
So biological systems can get harder to model. So yes, we do have the models that will tell you that, yes, if the moisture is this high and the temperature is this high, you're going to have a spike in nitrous oxide. But yes, that's part of the problem. There can be more to that.
So would, like, if a farmer was interested in like lowering their nitrous oxide from application,
Yes.
would they need to test the soil themselves like before application? Is that like how they would do it, and then just look at the research parameters for like what causes it and try to avoid that?
I think looking at measuring the soil every time you apply manure might not be very feasible, but looking at the crop requirements, like how much manure you applying, because if the plants need X amount of nitrogen and you give them X plus 3 amounts, the 3 is going to linger around, and that's a harm for the emissions. But if they need X amount of nitrogen and you give them X amount, you're going to reduce the possibility of having emissions.
Yeah, so just making sure not to overapply is the goal. And
Is the goal.
That's probably like the biggest change you can make and control.
Yes.
Okay, so in your research, cover crops helped reduce pre-plant nitrate levels, but they didn't always reduce nitrous oxide in manured soils. What's the takeaway for farms that rely on cover crops in their rotations?
Yeah, so I think that ties back to my previous answer on nitrous oxide not being the bigger problem. Like, we found out that yes, it's an issue that we need to give attention, but it's less of a problem than methane. But going back to your question on cover crops, I think we see that they play a part in the soil dynamics. So they help reduce nitrate leaching. This is when nutrients are just washed down. So cover crops are good for that. With regards to reducing nitrous oxide emissions, there was not much effect to that, but at least they contribute to soil health. So that's where we say that cover crops they're not the silver bullet, that if you have cover crops, you're not going to have emissions, but at least we know that they're part of the tools in the toolbox to good soil health and reducing the environmental impact of manure systems. So they're part of the solution, but not all the solution. So farmers should keep doing the cover cropping. It plays a part in the soil health. There is a way it relates to the environmental impact of manure.
Which practices that reduce greenhouse gases also improve local air quality, and where do trade-offs or challenges tend to show up?
There are so many practices that are trying to address the air quality. These range from manure covers that I talked about. Some people have covers on their lagoons and trap all the gases and flare them. In other developed systems, they can capture all those gases and send them back to the grid. So that's one technology that we have the belief that is reducing on emissions. There is also what people have been doing with composting and just doing some good solids liquid separation. But it also ties back to what I said on feed efficiency. Feed efficiency just means we give the animal just the right amount of feed that it needs. So just think of it like a human, that if you feed more than your body needs, the rest comes out as waste. So there's that school of thought that is being built that we should give animals just the right amount of nutrients, the right amount of food they need. Let's be efficient with the feed, then we'll see a reduction in emissions. Some of the trade-offs could range from a shift in emissions. Like when I talk of the digesters, you're talking of digesters to reduce emissions in methane, but then you might be causing maybe other things that you have to deal with. Like you have to manage sludge with digesters. There's a problem with sludge management. The sludge is what remains after the biogas has been dealt with. So sludge management is a bigger issue in biodigesters. So there's also trade-offs financially, because these technologies are not cheap. So you're telling someone to reduce their emissions by implementing a $1 million technology project. So where's that money coming from? Somebody has to pay for it. The money has to come from somewhere. So it's a trade-off.
I feel like it's hard because right now there's there's grants and carbon credits available, but there gets to be a point maybe 20 years from now where it's commonplace for people to have more advanced manure management practices than right now even.
Yeah.
So those grants and carbon credits probably won't exist by then because it's more for like the early adopters.
Yeah.
So that is a concern.
Yeah, I think it's more of an opportunity to like legislators and policymakers that some of these technologies, like some of these grants and opportunities like NRCS, EQUIP, and other technologies that are subsidizing, other grants that are subsidizing these technologies for farmers, should stay around. Like the farmers need them because it's harder to implement some of these technologies without financial support from somewhere. So yes, I understand that after early adopters, we don't know if we'll have this money, but we hope we can keep it. Because the problem still persists and we still need to keep working day by day to solve it. We've done a study where we've looked at methane cycles in the colder months and the warmer months. So in the colder months, the animals eat more to stay warm. So you will see kind of a spike in emissions. And when it gets warmer, they eat less. So you will see a drop in emissions. So there's a direct relationship between emissions and
amount of food consumed. Yeah. That's really cool. Yeah.
So it's just good to give them the right amount of feed. But what is the right amount?
And then that varies cow to cow too.
That varies, yeah.
Yeah.
Situation to situation.
I guess that would be nice with like robotic milking systems. Like if you can tweak the ration per cow, it'd be super helpful.
It would. Just that if you have 1,000 animals.
Yeah, then yeah, exactly.
That gets complex.
Yeah. What is one simple monitoring or record-keeping habit that improves both regulatory compliance and public trust?
I think this is an opportunity for farmers. They do have records on milk production and feed, but if you ask them when do you apply manure, how much manure do you apply, I think the answer will not be as clear as how much milk they produced. So if we can interest them with keeping records of their manure management, like, how much manure did you have? When did you apply? How hot was it the day you applied? And what acreage did you have for this amount of manure? I think just that would be really good to show, to policy. If let me say, if something comes up and says, oh, these guys are over applying manure, you have your numbers. You're like, no, last year, these are how many gallons I applied on this amount of acreage. So we need to encourage farmers to keep more records on their manure management, just like they do for their production.
I feel like that will start to shift naturally too as work goes on with like manure management research because of all the different potential products that could bring in extra revenue. I feel like when something is linked to money, obviously the interest goes there.
Yes.
So I think eventually down the line, there'll be a natural interest in it because of the push right now.
Yeah, I think that's right. Where money is, there will be attention. So definitely that calls for more funding for these manure management systems. And yeah, because as researchers, we're giving it our best. We're giving it all our energy. We're putting all our energy in solving this. So if the finances come and we know where the money to fund some of these technologies we're suggesting is, we hope to see more of that interest and more the record keeping that you've been talking. Like if you look at an example of California, in the Central Valley, most of the farmers were able to pick up interest because of some California grants. Like California is running some grants on reduction of methane and carbon credits to all these methane capturing technologies. So that picked a lot of interest, because I think one thing we forget is farmers are interested in solving the problem, but they just need support from us, the researchers, and support from at least some sources of funding. So yes, I agree with you.
So, from your perspective, what kinds of changes tend to pay off fastest? Operational tweaks, nutrient capture technologies, or energy projects?
I think that's interesting. I would say each of those can get traction. I don't think there's one that's higher than the other. In operational tweaks, like I talked about, feed efficiency and the scraping time, you'll definitely see some payoffs pretty quick. And some of those are actually lower input, like lower financial input. So you'll probably see something coming out of that pretty quick. With technologies like the digesters, yeah, those are also good. But like I talked about the initial capital investment. That might be kind of a hindrance, but they could be good sources of revenue. So that gives them that advantage that yes, they're high capital, but good for revenue. But then when I think of like programs like I told you, like NRCS Equip, they just help farmers, like the subsidized technologies for farmers who are willing to adopt them. If we have maybe some state level cost sharing opportunities, if the state can bring in a 50% and the farmer has 50%, we'll definitely see some good traction with that.
What funding or cost sharing programs are actually worth a producer's time right now, and what kind of records should they have ready?
Programs, I think it's still now a TBD. Like for the case of Idaho, I can't think of any program. We're working in different times now, but I can't think of any programs that are directly focused on that. But we're on the lookout, and if we see an opportunity like that, we're willing to advise the farmers on adoption. But I think if we have our records, if the farmers have their records, you have your nutrient management plans, you have your hard numbers, and your financials are checked. I think when these opportunities come up, you'll definitely be at the forefront of receiving them. So yeah, I can't think of any specific Idaho programs that's focusing on this at the moment. But there's always openings. So who knows?
Yeah,
Maybe by the hearing of this, there could be a project that is looking at exactly that.
true. How can they find those when they do pop up?
There is extension educators at the University of Idaho extension centers in your counties. Many of us faculty have extension appointments, so our duty is to get some of this complex jargon, complex programs, and break them down for the farmers. So I think the farmers should stay plugged into our communications and reach out to us and show interest in these programs. But the extension educators at the county offices, those ones would be good advocates for that.
That's great. Thank you. So Idaho CAFE is a very unique research facility. What kinds of measurements or trials will it let you do that smaller scale projects can't, especially when it comes to pinpointing where different types of emissions come from on a dairy farm?
I'm very excited about Idaho CAFE because it's gonna give us an opportunity to run like so many research experiments, so many variations. And just for context, this is gonna be a 2,000 cow dairy at its full capacity. So it gives us an opportunity to move some of these smaller scale, lab scale tests and technologies and proofs of concept to a full scale commercial dairy. So there is the dairy part of things, but there's also the crop side. So it's going to be a fully integrated dairy, like a full scale commercial dairy with the crops and the livestock and the milking systems and the maternity barns. So it gives us an opportunity to see the hot spots on the dairy. Where actually do we have the most emissions, and what are the best management practices that we can suggest? And these probably should be best tailored for dairy farmers in Idaho. So that's what gets me very excited, because we get something that is for Idaho by Idaho, something that is ours, that answers our Idaho-centric questions.
So, specific to your research on CAFE, we did talk about like the seaweed and the additives 3-NOP. What other research are you planning on conducting on CAFE?
So the first thing with, like you talked about the green feed systems, if we can have those green feed systems, we can be able to try and test for different feed additives and see how they reduce emissions. But we can also do a full-scale dairy and say that a dairy of 1,000 animals should be able to generate this amount of emissions or this amount of carbon credits, if you want to look at it from that angle. Mm-hmm. Which that can be done on a small scale, and you say, oh, this is for one animal, so times 1,000, this is how the numbers look. But we have an opportunity where we do it on a full-scale dairy and find out the total load of emissions and total load of carbon credits that we can get. So try these best management practices on a full scale. So going back to that, yes, we can use the green feed systems to measure emissions for different feed additives, but we also have an opportunity with the manure management systems, in that CAFE is going to be set up in a way that we can plug in different manure systems. So it could be a composting system, could be a vermifiltration system, could be a solid liquid separation system, and we can be able to tell which of those management systems is actually doing something big for reduction of emissions. So that is one other thing that I see myself doing at CAFE.
Do you know yet, like specifically of the ones that you mentioned, that is going to be pushed for, I guess, once the dairy is operational?
So at the moment, we're not pushing for any. We just have plugins. Like we could have 3 systems online. We do not have any preference.
Oh, wow. Okay.
We do not have a preference on which system is the best, but the plan we have is we can have 3 systems running at the same time.
And are they like just like mini versions?
They could be mini versions.
Oh, cool.
Pilot scale kind.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're going to have like a manure shed where we have the different technologies. So actually that could even be a plug. If you're out there and you have a technology that you think can work, we're receiving, ideas and, concepts of what we can plug into our system and see how it works and matches the other technologies.
How can local producers, students, or industry partners get involved in your work or try out new ideas on the farm?
So for producers, students, and industry partners, we see them getting involved in. We're gonna have a lot of fun trials. So I think they're welcome to come and check out these trials and ask us what we're doing and what the results show. We see opportunities for internships and some kind of collaborative projects, maybe with the community, or the producers could want, they could know something that they want us to experiment and try out. I think we're receiving all those ideas. So that's how I see CAFE being. It's an open platform where we're receiving almost feedback from anyone, any concerned community member.
I'm so excited to see it actually be operational. Every time I've gone out there, it's just been a construction site. So to have it actually come to fruition and be involving just the community, all of dairy and Idaho farming, I just get so excited because it's been a long time coming. I mean, they've been talking about this project for a long time.
Yes. When I joined, it's one of the things that sort of got me excited, because I was like, wow, this is going to be a big dairy. I've been there and I've seen the progress. I know it takes a lot of resources to have a dairy of that scale. That's why it's going to be the biggest in the USA. So when it's up and running, it's going to be amazing.
Mm-hmm. When it comes to dairy and emissions, what do you wish more people understood?
I wish people understood that farmers are actually concerned about this. They're not ignoring the problem. So there is that school of thought that, everyone else is doing the right thing and it's the farmers who are not, interested. I think I've talked to farmers, I've been on farms, and I see how farmers are interested in solving these problems. Sometimes need help from us. They need help from legislators. They need help from extension educators, but they know the problem and they're doing everything they can in their power to solve it. So I wish people knew that and appreciated it more. But I think this is a good way at least to pass that message that yes, for the farmers we've met, they're very interested in this and they're doing all the best they can.
That's wonderful advice. I really hope this reaches some people out there that maybe have those conceptions of the dairy industry. How can farms communicate progress without losing privacy, biosecurity, or public misunderstanding?
I think farmers should know that some of us are allies. We're here for them. We're not here to kill the industry. We're not here to bash the industry. So I think our objective is actually to build that trust with the farmers and make them believe that we're here for them.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's issues of privacy and, who has the data to what. But at least if we can come up and say that, hey, my dairy has reduced emissions by 30%. I don't think that takes away anything from their proprietary information or from their IP or, their data that they don't want to share. So we want to see these success stories of, hey, I implemented this and I was able to reduce emissions by this. I think that gives them, something to brag about and know that I'm contributing to a bigger cause. But I still go back to what I said, that some of us are allies and we are out to support the cause of dairy farmers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So sometimes we get that kind of energy that, oh, maybe these guys are here to not destroy the industry and say particular kind of things. But I emphasize it that we are allies. Many of us, we've grown up on dairies. We love dairy farming. We love agriculture. So we're here to see it succeed.
It's very well put. If someone wants to follow your work or get involved, what's the best way to connect with you?
So I think the best way to connect with me is through the University of Idaho. We have an extension website. We do have University of Idaho pages online. I'm sure if you just Googled my name, a lot of information about me will come up. Check me out online on any platform that you want, or you could email me directly. My email is also available online, but it's G, that's my first name is Gilbert, so G, then my last name is Miito, MIITO, at uidaho.edu. So feel free to reach me, contact me, and let's chat, let's connect. Regularly, I also share updates at field days and through producer networks. So maybe you'll see me in, the next field day you're out. So who knows? If you see me, just say hello to me and say, listen to your podcast. Yeah, let's chat about it.
This was great. Oh my gosh. Thank you so much. I had a great time talking to you.
Oh, this is amazing. It's very amazing. Thank you for the chance to share my journey. And I had an amazing time.
Thanks again to Dr. Gilbert Miito for joining me today and for breaking down what dairy emissions are, where they come from, and what practical solutions can actually work on farms. If you want to learn more about Dr. Miito's work, I've linked his University of Idaho profile in the show notes. If you enjoyed this episode, it would mean a lot if you shared it with a friend or left a quick review. It helps more people find the Clever Cow podcast. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time.